My name is Karthik. I run a company called Purplepatch. We are based here in the Silicon Valley, predominantly working with startup companies in everything from helping them get to their funding cycle with the VCs. Yes, we have driven quite a lot of times up and down Sand Hill Road. We work with a lot of larger companies as well in what we call as content-driven marketing or content-driven demand generation. And the reason being that if you are a startup, a lot of times you're probably not going to get a sales guy to be convincing enough to come and work for you, especially if you don't have money to pay. But if you're either self-funded or you're funded by angels or VCs, surprisingly, they still demand that you have a pipeline, you show customers, you have traction with your product, you show a lot of what we call as buyer demand. What I plan to cover in the next few slides is how do you use marketing as a tool to actually rock sales without a sales force. And so not surprisingly, we managed to copy their logo pretty nicely. So the challenge with most product companies, if you will, are twofold, right? Especially in today's market, and we'll go over some of them, is one is how do you communicate what your product manages to solve for a buyer, right? Whether the buyer has a problem or a need, how do you figure out a product marketing fit? Two is once you have the fit, how do you then take that messaging to your buyer in a convincing way or in a manner in which they are going to be able to say, yes, I have a need, I will give you the time of my day to come and sell to me. And that to us is always a challenge because the way of how sales happens and the way of how traditional B2B marketing happened also has changed. The reason being it's become completely digital. And what do we mean by digital, right? If you look at it, there's a big grapevine out there. And these are all market facts. 93% of people usually read a review before they even want to talk to you. They trust their peers first, especially in today's interconnected world. Everybody wants to use peer networking as a way of enabling, and this happens in the B2B space. It's not just B2C where you look at Yelp reviews and you're making a decision. People in the buying cycle at the CIO levels are using peer networks to figure out what's going on in the market. They also, unfortunately or otherwise, search a digital footprint and word of mouth. So anything that you do in the digital world is going to leave a footprint of your company and your product. So people are going to be searching for that as well. And if you're not found, and if you're not found for the right reasons, it's even more challenging for you to make a compelling reason for people to believe in what you're trying to do. The buyer is in control, and they are changing the way in which we should be selling. This is fundamentally the difference between what has happened in the past to what is happening today. And that is what we find increasingly common among all our startup customers is that they think that they have a product, they think they have a buyer need, they think they have a product market fit, and then when they go to the market, they find that they are woefully left behind because the buyer is already in control of how they are buying their services. How is it all changing, right? So I'll have this in a PDF format. Sarah can send it out to you. It's a lot of fine print here, but I think it's very important, right? Till today, and then what's changing from today till tomorrow. First is approach. Typically, sales and marketing would just do one fine thing, which is find a new prospect, research the company, and keep fishing for an opportunity. That's changing to you really need to understand buyers and prospects, and you need to be found for the right reason. Failing which you become inconsequential or irrelevant to the buyer. Engagement model, mass communication, demographics, slice of market, mass email campaigns, mass digital, massive print. Everything used to be in massive scale, right? Marketing used to demand a lot of dollars. Now it's one-to-one targeting, it's contextual, it's behavioral, it's transforming from mass and massive to authentic and emotional. If you look at tactics, you used to do point-in-time blasts. Every month run a campaign, or every quarter run a webinar, or every so often do a particular event. And they were all in isolated channels. Today, it's all continuous engagement, and it's integrated channels. Unless you know what is happening in your LinkedIn, to what is happening in your email campaign, to what is happening in your social feed, and all of these are driving intelligence on how your marketing is producing lift, you're not going to be able to make a difference with your budgets. Metrics. This is the most important part that's changing the dynamics of how B2B marketing is happening. You typically used third-party data, Nielsen, the rest of them over there. You made passive guesses. You made intuitive decisions. Marketing could never justify why they would run a campaign, or it could never justify whether a campaign was successful or not. Today, you own the data. You literally can own your own data because your social, your sentiment, your signal streams, all of them produce massive amount of data that you should be able to analyze and produce fact-based decisions. This is how the whole game is changing from where it is yesterday to where it is today. Typically, and this is where we specialize in, and we try to educate customers on how they should even build a marketing program that would help generate demand, right? That's basically the core of this. There are 5 ways in which your buyers typically go through a trigger. One is they are in the spot of a competitive landscape. They want to figure out how can they do better than competition. 2, there's a window of opportunity that they realize and they want to capitalize on that. They want to see how they want to do that. 3rd, they have an expansion and growth initiative that's come top down. How will marketing help do that? 4th, peer recommendation. Somebody else has done it. Somebody else has done something better. I want to do it. I want to see how I can go about doing that. 5th, of course, is cost control and or business direction changes. These are not the end of all of these. These are predominantly the 5 major triggers that typically help a buyer go through a buying cycle. What happens at that point? Right? We'll say, hey, is this all not for a salesperson? 90% of prospects are already making decisions without your knowledge and without even you knowing whether you're in the buying basket of consideration. Right? This is not us. This is Aberdeen's research that's come through. 90%, which means that unless you are understanding your buyer, you're not making a difference to your sales. Here's what we typically use. Right? It's a interesting way of looking at how does a buyer typically go through a buying cycle. Why or what makes them move from status quo? Because they're doing something, it's working well. Why do they have to change? Why is that window of opportunity important for us? Unless we understand why they should move from a status quo and how do they treat that? If they move from the status quo, then the first thing they do look at is, what will this change imply within my business? If I even were to make a change, if I were to do something differently, why would it make a difference in my company, and what would the implications be? Bless you. The next thing they do is explore possible solutions, right? It's no surprise that they're not going to fall for one pony tricks or just use one solution. They're going to look at a basket of solutions. This is where peer reviews come in play. This is where your digital footprint comes in play. A whole host of things happen over here. And then what makes them commit to a solution? What kind of demands do they go through? What kind of justifications do they go through? What kind of considerations do they go through? How do they justify the decision? Because this is key as to where you should be found for the right reason. If you are not able to justify your solution to their decision-making process, it's not important to be in existence. Finally, how do they make the selection? Why is this important? I think if we understand this buyer's cycle or the journey map well, it helps us do 3 things. It helps us split marketing into which part of our marketing should be educational, which means that there's no direct benefit, but there's a huge educational evangelistic opportunity for marketing to play. Which part of our marketing should be differentiating? How should we be able to justify to our clients or our prospects that what we do is going to be different for them? And how are we able to validate what we are doing for them, right? All of this is how you build a marketing buyer journey. It's a huge, complicated thing. It's in the PDF, but there are multiple tools that you use: affinity mapping, focus groups, ethnographic research, analytics, multiple choice surveys, internal data. And then you really create a persona, because that is important in how you want to start building your demand generation program. Unless you understand what persona this buyer fits into, whether they are at the C-suite level, whether they are at the VP and director level, or whether they are at the market junior level or in the managerial level, you got to build those personas, clearly define what goals they go through. It's not about us, it's about them. What kind of reading material do they go through? What kind of daily challenges do they have? What kind of demands do they go through in their career that we are going to be able to support? Obviously, there's a lot of external data as well that we can use. And then you finally create a buyer persona. And I'll show you some of these examples in a bit. But you really can give a persona a name, and you look at what they're doing and what are they reading, where are they going to search for information, what kind of material are they looking at when they make a decision, what is their decision-making process. All of these matter. Once you get a buyer persona journey, you start looking at content. What kind of content are they looking at? Obviously, they don't always are serious readers, so they would be snacking, which means that they are just not ready for making any decision. They are browsing material. They're sort of looking at a lot of graphics, eye candy stuff that you can tease them with. Once they start getting slowly serious about the process, then they start seeking material, which means that's where your content's got to play a game. And finally, when they start selecting your product or selecting their basket of products, you got to have content that matches them as well. It's a big journey again. When you do snacking, what does snacking fit into, right? That's when they are moving from status quo, they are looking at change implications. That's when we call people are snacking. When they're exploring solutions and committing to a solution, they are seeking. And finally, when they're selecting, they are in this particular phase. What do they read? Ebooks, blogs, LinkedIn posts, videos, use cases, customer point of views, thought leadership. The whole content ocean is there. But how do you then start fitting in? This is how you start fitting in, which is, where is your buyer? In which part of the journey are they? What kind of a persona are they? How do you fit your content to map into that persona? And how do you then distribute it? When they're seeking, obviously they seek customer success stories. Who have you done this for? Industry experience, analyst coverage. Are you covered by the famous Gartner Forresters of the world? What kind of infographic models can you show that you're different from what the other competition is? Videos, how-tos. Most of them don't want to be sold at this stage. How do you provide enough information without gating it and treating it as a lead? Enough that you're saying, hey, here's material that will help you in the whole search process. We're happy to deliver this to you. And at the end of it, if you like more information, come back and talk to us, or come back and engage with us. We are happy to show you more. The minute you get material at this stage, you're obviously going to throw away customers. Nobody's wanting to give away their identity just because you gated your content. So let's imagine for a minute that you have a prospect who's coming in for your website, to your website. Today, most startups don't even know what they are doing on their website. There is no tracking. There is no way of even looking at what kind of keywords led to that particular prospect to come to our website. All of that matter if you do a content plan aligned to your buyer's journey. Finally, what do? You set up a whole content plan that works for various reasons, right? This is how you build content. Answer long tail search. Content really allows for people to search in the long tail, right? Typically, nobody searches for SAP consulting. They search for SAP integration with a TIBCO middleware, with whatever, Hybris connectivity, whatever it is, right? That is how content will help. That is where you start creating demand. It helps you reach unheard of prospects. Most customers land onto your website by default, not because they were searching for your company, but because there were some keywords on your website that allowed them to come to your website. How do you track them? How do you align it to market dynamics? When today everybody is talking about digital transformation, if you're still talking about infrastructure services, there's a little bit of a difference in your marketing's intelligence to what you're doing at this point. So what does that do? All of these tend to deliver your capabilities in a very buyer-aligned manner. It allows you to help build confidence with your prospects to say, hey, this is where we are, this is what we are doing, how is this relevant to you? Or what are the problems that you are solving, and how can we help you solve those problems? It helps you deliver complexity. Most of us don't build simple products. We build very, very complex products. How do we tell them the whole story without throwing the kitchen sink at them? Content helps us do this. Let me show you an example. I'll stop here if you guys want to ask questions, or I'll barrel on and show you some case studies on how we build buyer journeys and content maps. What do you guys want to do? Questions at this point? Yes?
So all these topics
No, just waiting. It's a pretty heavy PowerPoint, so it's just coming up. Yeah. So Axient, anybody from there? No, right. So Axient is a client of ours based in Mountain View. They do disaster recovery and backup. Right, so it's a very non-sexy business. What do you want to do? Just take reams and reams of data, write them onto tapes, shove them off-site, and then whenever somebody puts up their hand and says, hey, my server is broken down, then you come back and restore data. We were looking at how best they could sell, right? So, and this is a long haul presentation, guys, so be prepared to go through a lot of content. So we were looking at two parts. What were the buyer personas that were looking at Axient, and how do we build a detailed buyer journey definition? And why did we want to do that? We did this because, we'll go through all of these. I think these are all just, the approach is more important. We went through this because they felt that they were not getting enough traction from their inside sales, from their web content, as well as from their demand generation programs. Yes, they used to do webinar, used to get 10 people, used to do a complex event, it used to get them 100 leads, but closure rates were fairly small. So these were some of the approaches that we did. Again, I can share this after I remove all the names, but what really is important here is how we did this whole process, right? We looked at interviewing existing Axient customers as well as prospect lists, people that they gave us. That is very critical to how we want to build a roadmap, right? Because it's not just about what we are selling, but it's about who are the other buyers who are out there that don't know about us but can benefit from what we are doing. So, and then we created an Axient-specific buyer journey, built the personas, and then actually built a master content map. We'll show you all of that. And then how do we do a drip sequencing that actually moves marketing into demand creation? Because at the end of today's program, you must, if the only takeaway you go away with is marketing is responsible for demand creation, that's the best thing. Because today, nobody wants to spend on marketing without understanding what it's going to get for them. Gone are the days of branding and image creation and all of that, especially in the B2B space. Unless marketing is responsible for dollars, nobody's willing to commit to dollars. So we looked at existing customers, we looked at prospect customers, we did a combination of cold calls, voicemails, emails, did a whole bunch of interviews. Some of the industries we covered: financial sector, public sector, legal, manufacturing. These were some of the customers. These are all the interview questions. So it's a list of about 10 questions, I think. It was a big effort that we did over there. And then the key outcomes and insights, right? So these were all some of the insights that we drew from those interviews that we did. Fairly long haul at this point. But this is just to show you the detail at which we can go to what we are doing, right? This is the buyer journey that's most important for all of us. You remove Axient, you remove Purplepatch, put your company's name, this won't change. This is like the master plan for a buyer journey. What happens? There's a buyer out here who's not even in the market, right? He or she doesn't know that you exist, that your product or solution has relevance to them, and over a period of time, that product or solution is going to become a need for them, right? They are not even in the market at that stage, all the way to they are going to choose your product and they're going to implement it. This is the whole master template for a buyer journey. The phase one was all about how do we pull them in from not in the market to actually stimulate them, get to a problem definition, and show them our options of products. The phase two was how do we help them in the evaluation, how do we get to preferred recommendation stage, final approval, and implementation. So as you can see, gone are the days when marketing did something, created noise, and said, yep, this is what we did. But here we are actually in the spot for delivering sales opportunities, right? It's a long haul process. It goes from, what is the trigger or event that happened for this person who's not even in the market, all the way down to what kinds of problem surfaces, what problems were studied. So at every stage in this whole cycle, if you look at it, and I can share this with you later on, is a whole set of what we call trigger points. right? What is a trigger or event that has happened, and how is marketing responsible for that? Is our solution category one of their options? Marketing is responsible for that. Are we a possible option, and what is our rank? Again, marketing is responsible for that. Are we shortlisted? We are responsible. Are we preferred? We are responsible. Are we their selected vendor? Again, all the way down to, are we the incumbent vendor? This is a template that I think is a classic Bible. It's kind of well thought out. It's a whole lot of complexity, but everybody should take a look at this, because this is how today's B2B actually functions. And then based on that, we looked at what are all the key buyer actions. So KBAs are what we define as key buyer actions. So these are confirmed through research process. These are recommended by Purplepatch. These are in scope of content map, and then in scope of content map too. So it's a long haul process. But if you look at it, these are all the buyer actions that are provided by research. Research proved that typically buyers observe market trends, they track competitive activity, they do understand problem surfaces and problems identified, all the way down to they are able to create the business cases, they are able to check references. These are typical in the whole buyer journey. These are ones that we think is recommended because we want to always talk to stakeholders. We want to always talk about business cases where we are at the final level before proposal. We want to show them how we help them achieve business benefits, validate decisions. These are all some of the content areas that will solve the problems. These are content areas in the second phase that will solve the problem. What did this lead to? We actually created these buyer personas. There's Jarrett, who's the CIO. There's Ken, the corporate IT director. There's Tony, network admin. There's Barbara, who's the board member. Archie, who's the CFO. Sandra, who's the president. Each one of them, look at the amount of data that we created. These are all available as external data. You can go look at what material do they read, what kind of daily decisions do they have, what concerns are they going through, how do you make a good and lasting impression on them for each one of these characters, right? Because now we are now segmenting within the company or within the prospect who it is that we want to talk to and how are we going to talk to them. And eventually, this is what it all drills down to. How do we take content and split it into, or marketing and split it into, what are we going to do when there's somebody not even in the market who's not aware of who we are, who's not aware of they have a need for our product or solution, who does not even know that we exist on the face of this earth? How do we get found for them? Who are the people at that point that we are going to influence? Because obviously we don't want to waste our dollars on everybody, but we want to really target who are the people that we want to talk to. What kind of topics concern them, right? This is all about even the question of disaster recovery, right? How has the disaster recovery conversation shifted from technology features to business value? Because today companies are in the spot. If their servers go down and customers are complaining and there's no answer from the company that, hey, why did our data servers blink for 30 seconds? They are responsible for it. So CEOs are today put in the spot in the public domain if they are not able to justify why their business has been going through downtime at this point in time. So these were all sample content topics that we created for the marketing mix. And who is it directed at, right? Then this is the case for when they are stimulated. What kind of materials? This is when they are actually realizing that they have a problem and they are getting into the concept of problem definition. How are we going to help them do this from a content perspective, from a marketing segment perspective, to see that they are able to come to our website for the right reason? Because the fundamental change in how buyers make a decision today is from, oh, I found this company, now I got to make sense of why I should talk to them, to saying, I use these keywords and I found this company's landing page and I think it speaks to me, to my problems, and that is what I want to go after. That's the fundamental shift that's happening in the market. All the way down to options. What are all the options? How are we being found for it? How are we being ranked for it? How are we being positioned for it? Evaluation stage, right? When a buyer goes through an evaluation stage, what kind of content, even things like tools, right? Do we build ROI tools? Do we build comparison tools? Look at Progressive, the biggest insurance company that made the difference was there at many points in time. their insurance comparison tool would show up their rates as higher than some of Geico's or the others. But they showed it, and the conversion rate apparently on their website was over 63% every hour. And you know where Progressive was, right? So that is the kind of digital transformation and disruption that you're looking at, that you are being transparent enough with your prospect and customer that you're saying, I could be costly, but here are all your other options, but you still want to talk to me. Here are the reasons why you want to talk to me at this point in time. Here is some of the drip process that we evaluated from them, and then we obviously did a whole host of other marketing material for them at this point, and so on and so forth. So that's a actual live case study of how we build a content map, how we use marketing, and how we actually. Let me see if I have internet over here. So today, when everybody's talking about disaster recovery and backups, Accent actually talks about IT resilience. The whole conversation moved from tactical to being a strategic business case offering for their marketing and for the way they want to be found for. They didn't want to be found for disaster recovery anymore because it was a dial down market. People were not paying sufficient amount, but they are now looking at saying, how are we part of your IT resilience? And that is the entire message, right? So there are a variety of such examples, but I think that this really gives you a whole approach of how you got to understand where your buyers are, build stories around them to understand what kind of problems, use cases are they going to, and then transform your marketing to actually make sense to them and be responsible for the demand creation. That's where I said the whole concept of marketing has moved from noise to actually giving out the right signal and being responsible for revenues, being responsible for dollars in the opportunity cycle for sales. So that kind of is what I wanted to talk to you guys about, and I'm more than happy to answer questions at this point. Yes, sir.
What advice do you have about creating the content? It seems like such a volume of content may be required at every step of the journey, blog posts, white papers, videos, demos, how-tos.
Yeah.
If you're a small organization, do you do that internally? Do you look outside? Is there a way to automate the process?
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think the way to look at it is, instead of looking at them as items, you look at what topic are you looking at, right? Let's say you're talking about a concept or a topic that refers to the CIO level at the boardroom level that he wants to go pitch for. Now, in that case, you really don't want to be blogging about it, but you really say, can I write a decent white paper about this that can be found by them, because that becomes your asset that you're delivering to them. So again, if you go back to the buyer cycle and look at what part of their need are you going to fulfill with content, then it automatically tells you by itself as to what content asset that it can become. Now, in terms of how do you want to create it, I think some of them are just easy to write internally. Some of them are difficult to produce internally, so you want to look at outsourcing to people who do that. And a majority of it, I think, is the important part is this, right? If you look at what is your sales cost versus what is your marketing cost, the cost of producing content is way cheaper than hiring a sales guy and having them go at it, right? You're looking at 120K base plus bonuses to get a sales guy in place who's going to look and say, okay, where are my leads? Because he's not going to go find leads for you. He's going to look at, okay, where's my email list? Where's my, who are all my inbound campaign list people? Where's the opportunity? They will only qualify what is already existing. They will not generate new business, at least from the start perspective. So in that case, yes, you are better off investing in content versus hiring a full-time sales or hiring sales, because they will come and ask you for the same thing. Show me a white paper that I can send to my prospects. Show me a sales deck that I want to send to somebody that I had a conversation with yesterday. All of these are going to be demanded. So it is oxygen to your business. Does that answer your question?
In general, very specific, do you have outsourced firms you can point me to that
Yes, we do a whole lot of content generation by ourselves. But yes, there are other firms who do this as well. Happy to refer you to them. I'll leave my cards here and you can get me offline and then we can go over that. Yeah, totally. Yes, ma'am.
So you look at this as a process to eliminate salespeople, basically.
Not really. It's a start to getting into a pipeline that your salespeople can eventually come in and close. Because if you bring on a salesperson early on, he's going to look at it and say, what am I going to sell? Not a website. I need ammunition that I can go tell people that, hey, here I am. This is the kind of material that we do. Here's the demo of what we do. Here.
I can tell you, most salespeople are not going to go this in depth into these particular buckets. I mean, it's very good, don't get me wrong, and it's good that it can be outsourced if the company has discretionary funds to do so.
Not really. I would beg to differ there, right? We work with quite a few large firms too who have a whole variety of salespeople, everybody from inside sales all the way to client partners, account directors, and so on and so forth. They all need this as well. Because unless they are able to build a pipeline that's warm, they don't want to waste their time on cold prospecting at all. And content allows you to build warm prospecting very quickly and easily.
Oh yeah, it's a great concept, but it seems like it's like the gentleman said, it's a lot. And it's, if you have the funds, you just outsource it to your company or some other company.
Think about it the other way, right? Today, people are consuming content at the rate, attention span over the last 15 years has been proven to be less than 6 seconds for any piece of content. I moved my slides at the rate of 5 seconds, if you noticed. No, I honestly did. So that's why I covered it in 15 minutes. So when you look at it, and when people's attention span is that low, unless you have a steady stream of content that's going to follow through for you, your pipeline is going to be pretty empty very quickly. And at the same time, you will not be found for those reasons that you want to be found for. So it is becoming a necessity that you got to be. Many companies are turning themselves to be publishers, to put it in a different manner, is that they publish because that's the way they will be found. That's the way they are being assessed in today's market. That is the change in the digital business today. Yes, sir. Sorry. Good. I just saw that gentleman there.
You say a lot of companies have two roles really, like a marketing and a sales function. And what I think I'm hearing is you're an outsourced marketing function, because otherwise they have to really, pay for a marketer that's going to be doing the content generation in-house, right?
Yeah. Many companies do that in-house. We've had, we've worked with companies that have an in-house team as well that do a lot of content in-house. They create their own white papers, they create their own blogs, everything. And we work with them to actually only just accelerate what they're doing, right? That's one part. And to your point, yes, there is a blur between sales and marketing, because sales is now saying, well, if you want me to just keep doing cold prospecting, don't put load on me. If you want me to close and get you more revenue, get marketing to do its job, which is in fact to fill the pipeline, right? So there is a blur happening over there today, and that's how it's going to be. More and more marketing has to take on the load of being responsible for revenue, not just creating buzz.
So, Karthik, one question, follow up to what she was asking about, right?
Yeah.
If I have a targeted customer
Mm-hmm.
who is interested in my products, typically the attention span is much more larger than 6 seconds.
Yeah.
So having a lot of content for that targeted customers,
Mm-hmm.
what is the value proposition of generating the content tailored to fit the customer who's already interested?
Great question. It depends on where they are in your buyer journey. That journey of 6 steps, that again does not change. So if they are already in the evaluation stage and they are a lot more interested in what you're doing and they're aware of who you are and they hit your website more than 3 times, your content should be relevant to that particular stage, which is the evaluation stage. At that time, you would be producing things like ROI tools. You would be producing customer success stories. You wouldn't be talking about, this is where I am at the 50,000 feet, but you would be talking about, this is what I did at the ground level, and this is why customers believe us. Here's a testimony. Here's a video of my product. Here's a demo of what I'm doing at this point in time. Completely changes the game.
So the content is more for like the broad, the unknown alien customer.
It starts with everything, right? If you go back to the slide that I had, the content starts with people who are not even in the market. That is just an assumption in the fact that, you know, there are people who are, again, this template is only guidance, right? The content can happen here. Content, you could be in this particular stage, which means that you don't want to spend money in these areas, but you want to spend money in this area. That depends on how well you know your buyers. This does not change. If you know that your buyer is in this final, he's looking at contracts and stuff, then your content should be completely different at that point in time. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask about this.
Yes.
This is B2B. Fundamentally, is this the same B2C?
B2C, yes. B2C, I don't do, so I'm not going to be answering that. I play purely in the B2B space. Yeah, B2C could be completely different, and I know it is different because it has a lot more audience depth, audience intensity than this has. This, your audience itself is getting limited at various points in time.
Another question.
Yes.
So if we hire a firm,
Uh-huh.
since you're a marketing firm, will you be generating leads?
At a certain stage, yes. Right, that depends on two parts. One is where is your product and at what level of maturity it is, right? So then it brings us to the stage of, are we fitting into this problem definition stage, in which case then I can move you from problems to evaluation stage and to getting into a opportunity stage. But if you're here where you say, I'm just looking at markets and I'm trying to build a product, then we are not the right people for you. Yes, ma'am.
There are buyers who don't know you exist, but you have exactly what they need. How can you reach such buyers?
How can you search for those buyers?
Yes, they don't know you are in existence.
Yeah. So there are multiple factors that affect that. One is that obviously what kind of this. So this is where you are. The buyers are not even in the market, and you have a product that you think fits their problem statement at this point in time. Your content should look at how do you go across when they are tracking competitive activity or when they are tracking market trends. How is your product being found at that particular time? What kind of material do you have on your website that will lead them? Again, if you go back to the last slide, content is all about long tail search. People use big phrases to search today, so if your content is found for that particular long tail search, you would be found.
And then the content development.
Mm-hmm.
People do it differently.
Yes.
From the perspective of your presentation, how do you craft those words that make good content?
Yes. So we actually have writers, designers who sit and understand who your prospect buyers are, what your products are, and we put together a content map, which would go all the way from pure just website content to blogs to white papers to case studies to all of this over here. If you look at it, right, it's a detailed breakdown of topics, and how do you then aggregate them to which part of the buyer journey that you want to go through. Is it a white paper? Is it a blog? Is it an infographic? Is it a video? Is it a customer success story? All of those matter in your content development plan.
What about the website? Do you have anything for website?
The website is the anchor to all of this, right? So you are going to, where do you publish? You're going to publish it on your website.
Do you have any input into someone's website?
Well, it is, the content itself is going to direct how your website is going to look, right? So for instance, again, back to what Accent was doing. Initially, they were seen as a disaster recovery company, but after talking to us and the way we improved their content, they changed into data resilience, and everything that we have over here is material that we publish for them. Yes, sir.
What's the cost cycle and the time cycle if I was a company?
To build a content map or to build a buyer journey, to build content for you, depends on multiple things.
All of the above, you can divide it into the steps so I
Yeah.
get an idea of how much I'm going to need before I
Yeah, so we typically ask for a 90-day cycle before you are able to see tangible, warm leads into your website coming through your website at this point.
And which of these stages would you be working to get to that 90 days?
We'd probably do the buyer journey in about 4 weeks, and then the whole content in about the next 8 weeks to publish.
Is this chart that you have up behind you,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of where I'm asking you. To get to that chart, start writing the content.
Mhm.
figure out how long it takes.
To write content, we probably
To get to this point for a company, producing the sample content and the personas it's going for.
it's probably about 6 weeks time.
Typically, what's the bundle of money we're looking at?
Oh, I could probably just look at that from a use case and then tell you what it will cost. I don't think I have a ballpark that I can throw at you at this point.
So you don't have a bigger than bedbox, smaller than ballpark than that.
We don't do that because every customer is different.
So how do we engage the process of determining cost?
We'll give you an estimate once we know what your product is and who you're going after and what stage your product is in and where you are in your marketing at this point in time. I could take this conversation offline with you and then we'll do that.
Okay, and is there any chance you could produce these slides for us?
The action slides? Yeah, I'll probably remove the branding and then send it out to you.
That'd be wonderful.
I'll send it to Jyoti and then you can distribute. Yeah. Yes.
Karthik, what's the typical shelf life for some of this? What's the life?
Great question. I think content, like I told you, right, the first of it is in long tail search. And the second of it is I have found in some of my customers where they have even retired a product in 18 months, they've got demand for it. So I'm looking at content shelf life of anywhere between 18 to 24 months.
And the second question was, how do you ensure the usability?
That goes to the topic, right? So if you look at where you are in the buyer journey and what you are looking for to demonstrate to that buyer, then that topic could be split into multiple assets. A single topic could be a white paper, it could be a slide deck, it could be a blog, it could be any of them, right? So it depends on the topic versus looking at content and saying, how am I going to reuse this? I'd rather you look at the topic and say, how am I going to be relevant with this topic, and in how many formats can I then distribute the topic, right? Same way, it goes back to snacking, seeking, and searching. When you're snacking, you're just looking at that and, hey, that's an interesting topic. I'll save this for later. And then when you're seeking for it, you're going to read deeper. You're going to probably not read on a mobile. You're going to read on a laptop or on a tablet. And then when you're actually making selections, you're doing multiple research at that point in time. So.
And do you also differentiate between content which is more like a self-serve versus something that is used by the salespeople?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So when you look at the whole buyer map, your sales would typically be involved at the stage of evaluation and selection because that is where they are wanting to make the difference and wanting to show why we are valuable and what is happening and so on and so forth. But the whole demand creation part of it is part of marketing's responsibility today, which is where I would differentiate the content between, okay, what can the sales guys use, one-page slicks, a video demo link or whatever it is that you can showcase and use. But to create that funnel is where I would use the rest of the content map to differentiate. Yes, sir.
So basically, your company would be useful for a company that's not yet have marketing officer.
Yeah, we do. We work with marketing officers as well because they typically tend to hire us for the content part of it. In many cases, we work with marketing departments with larger companies like Cisco and Equinix, where they have enough teams, but they always are looking to add more because for them, content is just a big ocean. They constantly keep adding to it. So we work with multiple levels of companies at this point in time. Yeah. Ma'am, yes. Let me come to, she was, yeah.
Content as per most of us are small business.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about attention span, and there's a lot of competition. So if you develop some contents, they don't have to be there for a very long time. You keep bringing some
Yeah, but then your audience will always be wider, right? So you definitely want to keep older content as well. Unless your product has completely changed, in which case you want to retire some of the content and you want to start using new content. Again, it goes back to, if you look at the buyer map, it goes back to where is your buyer and what is his product need? Is your content relevant to that? If your buyer profile has changed in the sense that I don't want to go after manufacturing, I just want to go after retail, then you're going to sort of retire all your manufacturing content and then go after retail content because that's what you want to go after. Right? Yes, ma'am.
So, I think a lot of us who's processing the information in a different way and not in terms of technology. I'm processing this for a nonprofit, and so it's the same thing where I have a buyer who's like, I'm trying to sell a social cause, saying that okay, so this is something that is important to the city, and then I generated data out of the survey saying that okay, so and it's same with we create blog posts, posters, and content. So I'm wondering for somebody like you, if you have clients who are non-profit, non-tech, or non.
We do, but they typically they deal with a completely different buy cycle because most, and we call them as SLEDs, social, local, state, local, education, defense, all of these. They typically put you through an RFP grinder. So unless you come out of the grinder, you're not going to, no amount of marketing is going to help you at that point. Unfortunately, that is the case, right? I mean, if you go to a University of California system, they'll throw you an RFP book that's like 350 pages just for one RFP. Request for proposal. Right? How are you even going to? What is marketing going to help you in that? You're just fighting at the dollar level at that point in time, and resumes and capabilities and all of that. So I'm assuming that most of the time your buyer audience would put you through that process as well, because you'll deal with cities, you'll deal with states, you'll deal with a lot of larger than B2B buyers that will.
It's not in terms of dollars.
Yeah.
Or like our buyer is like a resident in the city, and our buyer is applying to get funding from
Mm-hmm.
design. We do the same thing of okay, so this is our idea, they're expanding on it, and then we say okay, this is our next step, this is what we did.
Yeah.
That's
It doesn't change. The process doesn't change. Everybody, even government officials, go through snacking, seeking, and searching process. That doesn't change at all. It's just how are you going to be found, and then the process of procurement is all that is different. Same way, the difference between a nonprofit and a profitability is just at the end of the tax season how you file it, right, and the certification that you own, right. I'm assuming that you're responsible for salaries, you're responsible for insurance, everything that a typical business is, responsible for as well. So yeah, that process does not change. This is kind of, the Bible of how buyer journeys happen, even for a B2B2C, right? Even if you're selling to an end consumer, even the way they seek and they search and they buy is nearly the same as this. There could be a lot more finer granularity to it because that has more of emotions and, what do you call that? You just make instantaneous decisions. You don't have necessarily logical. You talk about all of that, right? Then there is sex and all of that come into play. In a B2B, you're supposedly a lot less emotional and a lot less, everything. You're making more scientific judgment or evidence-based judgment at that point in time. So, yes, sir.
Should all this content be search engine optimized?
All the time.
So that's still effective.
You are still paying to the Google Warlord.
Do you do SEO analysis
Yes.
as well?
Yes. That's another start of how you build your content map. What is the website seeking traffic at, and how is it going to change your content?
So, in one of your slides, you showed a holistic profile of all the executives, right?
Mhm.
What their interests are.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendation of tools that can do? Because I know the information is available,
Mhm.
like LinkedIn, Facebook, and all that fun stuff. But are there any tools to consolidate all that?
Not really, because that depends on every buyer persona that you want to build. So there's not really. I mean, there are some tools out there, but they're just more cute than actually efficient at this point. Yeah. Anything else?
Last question. So when you do this kind of analysis for a company, like for example, Axel, they come back and tell you what sort of companies
No, we are responsible for the pipeline. Part of our revenue comes from saying we being responsible, saying okay, we will produce X number of leads in a month. Yeah.
So normally what is the percentage?
Well, again, right? So it's a question of, in the case of Axian, because they were going through a company pivot, they were moving away from just the DR to talk about data resiliency. We are now responsible for all their inside sales pipeline creation, 100% of it. And then for other companies, for some of the startups, we are just their entire outsourced marketing and demand generation arm. So they set us pretty aggressive deadlines of 12 opportunities a month. Yeah. Right. So it gets to be that aggressive, and then you've got to figure out how you want to do it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Did I hear you say that part of your contract, you make a goal of how much traffic is going to increase on the...
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yes, it is. Today, marketing is responsible for the dollars that come into its kitty, right? And we are not, like I said, we just can't have an open wallet and say, okay, we're going to spend this much, but you won't see any result. They're like, no, we want demand creation at the end of the cycle.
What happens if you don't reach it? Or what happens
We don't get paid. We don't get paid, and we'll know that very early on that we'll not get paid if we see what's happening in the pipe.
So you're basically paid on commission, so to speak?
That there is definitely a commission on what we're doing, and there are other pricing models too.
Then watch your card.
All right.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that was useful. What is that?